On a single Labor Day weekend in 1952, 44,000 people walked through the doors of one casino on Virginia Street in Reno, Nevada. One casino, one weekend. The street itself had a dozen more just like it, stacked end to end for 6 blocks, neon signs 3 and 4 deep, the Reno Arch blazing overhead. Today, a placemaking study commissioned by the city found that 70% of Virginia Street's frontage is dead. No active businesses, no street-level engagement, just blank casino walls and faded for-lease signs. The casino those 44,000 people visited was demolished in 1999. The 12-story Art Deco hotel across the street was imploded on Super Bowl Sunday in 2000. The flagship Harrah's, the original, the one that launched a global empire, closed during COVID and never reopened. The building is still there, dark. Before Las Vegas, before Atlantic City, before every tribal casino and riverboat in America, there was Reno. And the story of how it got there and how it lost it starts with a wooden bridge over the Truckee River. The spot where downtown Reno sits today was, for thousands of years, home to Washoe and Paiute peoples who lived along the Truckee River as it flowed out of the Sierra Nevada toward Pyramid Lake. The meadows were green and well-watered, an unusual thing in the high desert of the Great Basin. When Euro-American immigrants started crossing the region in the late 1840s, bound for the California gold fields, they stopped in these meadows to rest their animals on the native grass before attempting the brutal climb over the Sierra. The Truckee itself was the problem. It ran fast, its bottom was a mess of boulders, and getting a wagon across it could cost you an axle or worse. So when a Missourian named Charles William Fuller built a wooden bridge over the river in 1860, along with a rough-hewn inn and tavern on the bank, he was selling the most basic product in the West, a safe crossing. Fuller's Crossing, people called it. That bridge and that inn sat on the exact ground where Virginia Street crosses the Truckee River today, where the Riverside Hotel still stands, where the whole city of Reno would eventually take root. Fuller didn't stick around long. In 1861, he sold the whole operation, bridge, inn, tavern, to a sharper businessman named Myron Lake. Lake was the kind of man who understood leverage. The territorial legislature granted him a franchise to collect tolls, and he made sure to position himself on the main route between California and the booming silver mines of the Comstock Lode 20 miles south. Virginia City was pulling millions of dollars in ore out of the mountains, and every load of lumber, every barrel of flour, every piece of mining equipment heading to the Comstock had to cross Lake's Bridge. He renamed the place Lake's Crossing, built a proper hotel called Lake's House, and got rich on the traffic. By the mid-1860s, he owned more property on both sides of the river than anyone else in the meadows. Then the railroad came, and Lake's world got bigger. In late 1867, Chinese laborers and their overseers with the Central Pacific Railroad finished the grueling work of laying track over the Sierra, blasting tunnels through granite, and pushing eastward toward a rendezvous with the Union Pacific somewhere in Utah. The railroad needed a depot in the Truckee Meadows, and Lake had the land. On May 9, 1868, the Central Pacific auctioned off town lots at the new depot site. Parcels sold to eager buyers in a single day, and a town materialized where there had been tents and mud. The railroad officials decided against the name Lake's Crossing. Instead, they named the town after Major General Jesse Lee Reno, a Union officer from Virginia who had stayed loyal to the federal cause and been killed at the Battle of South Mountain in 1862. Reno had never set foot in Nevada, but his name was on the map now, and it would stay. For the next 3 decades, Reno was a standard railroad town. Small, rough, useful. It served as a gateway for travelers heading to California or coming from it. The Comstock mines fed it business through the 1870s, though by the 1880s those deposits were thinning and the whole region felt the slowdown. The 1890 census counted the city's population somewhere around 3,500 people. The 1900 census put it at 4,500. It was a place where ranchers came to do business, where freight changed hands, where you could get a drink before the long haul west. The University of Nevada, had moved from Elko to Reno in 1885, which gave the town a thin veneer of respectability. But nobody was writing songs about Reno. Not yet. What changed everything was a combination of mining money, one very ambitious man, and the peculiar economics of unhappiness. The mining money came first. Around 1900, new strikes in Tonopah and Goldfield, 200 miles south, set off another boom. And riding that boom was a 24-year-old former cattle drover from Arkansas named George Wingfield. Wingfield had arrived in Nevada with almost nothing, dealt cards in Tonopah, grub-staked miners, and by 1906, at the age of 30, was worth an estimated $30 million, a staggering fortune for the era. He'd made it in partnership with George Nixon, a Winnemucca banker who became a United States Senator. When they split their holdings in 1909, Wingfield took the mines and moved to Reno. What Wingfield did in Reno over the next 2 decades amounted to building the city's entire financial infrastructure by hand. He purchased the Nixon National Bank and renamed it the Reno National Bank. He bought the Golden Hotel on Virginia Street in 1915. He acquired property along the river. By the 1920s, his 12 banks controlled somewhere between 50 and 65% of all outstanding loans in the state of Nevada. He was the richest man in the state, a Republican National Committeeman, and he shared a switchboard in his bank building with the Democratic Party's most powerful attorneys. People called him the King of Nevada, and nobody was exaggerating by much. In 1920, Wingfield bought a parcel of land in the middle of the Truckee River, an island that people had been calling Belle Isle, for $20,000, and immediately donated it to the city. They named it Wingfield Park in his honor, and it sits there still, a green oval in the river's current, right in the center of downtown. It was the gesture of a man who considered the city his personal project. Wingfield saw something that would reshape Reno's future. He noticed that the city's liberal divorce laws, Nevada required only a 6-month residency and allowed multiple grounds for dissolution, were quietly attracting out-of-state visitors willing to spend real money while they waited. In 1906, Laura Corey, wife of the president of U.S. Steel, came to Reno for a divorce, and the national press coverage that followed put the city on the map as a destination for the unhappily married. Wingfield, who understood the hotel business as well as anyone, lobbied the state legislature in 1927 to cut the residency requirement from 6 months to 3. Business boomed immediately. To house the incoming divorce trade, Wingfield hired Frederick de Longchamps, Reno's homegrown architect, a mining engineer turned designer who would eventually create more than 500 buildings across Nevada, to design a new riverside hotel on the very site where Fuller had built his first bridge. The previous riverside had burned in 1924. De Longchamps gave Wingfield a 6-story brick building in the late Gothic Revival style, with cream-colored terracotta detailing and 40 corner suites equipped with kitchens, connecting rooms for children and servants, and views of the Truckee. It opened in 1927 and was the tallest building in the state. Wingfield installed a bank on the ground floor, leased out casino space, and watched the money come in. The Riverside wasn't just a hotel. It was a waiting room for the newly liberated, and the weekly rate reflected it. Around the same time, in October of 1926, Reno erected a steel arch over Virginia Street to celebrate the completion of the Lincoln and Victory highways. The arch cost $5,500 and was meant to be temporary, but the city council decided to keep it, and in 1929, they held a contest for a slogan. A man from Sacramento named G.A. Burns won the $100 prize with 7 words: Reno, the biggest little city in the world. They put it on the arch, and it glowed over Virginia Street for the next 37 years before being replaced by a bigger, flashier version, and then another one after that. The original arch still exists. It was moved, stored, used as a movie prop, and eventually reinstalled on Lake Street by the river, a few hundred yards from where it started. Then came 1931, and Reno's transformation accelerated. The stock market had crashed. The country was in the grip of the Depression. Nevada's traditional industries, mining, ranching, agriculture, were all suffering. Wingfield himself had been devastated. One of his bank managers, a man named Henry Clapp, had been embezzling funds and buying risky stocks for 8 years, losing more than $500,000 before he was caught. The scandal weakened public confidence in Wingfield's banking chain, and when the broader financial collapse hit, his empire crumbled. By 1932, his 12 banks had failed, and $500,000 in state funds were unaccounted for. Citizens who had lost their savings dumped garbage on the lawn of his once stately Court Street home. The richest man in Nevada was put on a restricted monthly income of $500 by Crocker Bank of San Francisco, which had seized his hotels. The king of Nevada was managing his own properties as a hired employee. But Nevada, characteristically, kept dealing. The state legislature, desperate for revenue, did two things in the same session that would define Nevada for the rest of the century. They legalized casino gambling, and they cut the divorce residency requirement to 6 weeks. 6 weeks. No other state came close. Wingfield himself, diminished but still politically connected, had enough influence left to help push the gambling bill through the state Senate. The logic was pure survival economics. If you can't dig wealth out of the ground, you extract it from human appetites. The appetite for risk, the appetite for freedom, the appetite for a fresh start. And Reno was positioned to serve all three. The divorce trade surged. Through the 1930s, despite the worst economic collapse in American history, more than 30,000 divorces were granted in the Washoe County Courthouse. The population of Reno was only about 18,000. That means divorce seekers outnumbered residents by nearly 2 to 1 over the course of the decade. They stayed in hotels, ate in restaurants, hired lawyers, shopped on Virginia Street, and, because they had 6 weeks to fill, they gambled. The economic impact was enormous. Dude ranches sprang up outside of town to cater to wealthier women seeking privacy. The Flying M.E., the Pyramid Lake Guest Ranch, Washoe Pines. The phrase "taking the cure" entered the national vocabulary. Mary Pickford had already gotten her Nevada divorce in 1920. Now came Cornelius Vanderbilt, Jr., who wrote a novel about it. Jack Dempsey came, Rita Hayworth, Arthur Miller, who stayed at the Pyramid Lake Ranch at the same time as Saul Bellow, two of the greatest American writers of the century, sitting around a ranch in the Nevada desert, waiting for their marriages to end. And all of them, by tradition, were supposed to walk from the courthouse to the Virginia Street Bridge afterward and throw their wedding ring into the Truckee. The legend appeared in print as early as 1927 in a pamphlet with the wonderful title, "Reno, It Won't Be Long Now, 90 Days and Freedom." Cornelius Vanderbilt, Jr. put the scene into his 1929 novel, and when they made it into a movie a decade later, the ring toss became the climactic moment. People called the Virginia Street Bridge the Bridge of Sighs, borrowing the name from Venice, and it showed up on postcards all over the country. A stylish woman in heels, leaning over the rail, flinging a gold band into the current. Historians spent decades arguing over whether anyone actually did it or whether it was pure marketing. Then, in 1976, 3 fortune seekers waded into the Truckee underneath that bridge looking for loose change. What they pulled out of the silt were more than 400 wedding rings, gold bands, silver bands, bands with stones still set in them. The myth was true, and the river had been keeping the receipts. Meanwhile, gambling was building its own economy on Virginia Street. The early clubs were modest operations, a few tables, some slots, a bar. The real money still came from the courthouse. The Washoe County Courthouse itself was a de Longchamp creation, completed in 1911. A classical revival building with Beaux-Arts influences, its columns and portico becoming as famous as any building in town. By tradition, divorcees would kiss those columns on their way out, a ritual of liberation that the press ate up. Between the courthouse and the Virginia Street Bridge, there was only 1 block of sidewalk and the Riverside Hotel. A woman could walk from the end of her marriage to the symbolic disposal of her ring in about 3 minutes, passing through Wingfield's hotel lobby on the way. It was the most efficient emotional architecture in America. In February of 1935, on his 25th birthday, a young man named Harold Smith Sr. opened a tiny gambling club at 236 North Virginia Street. He had 2 slot machines and an 8-foot-tall penny roulette wheel. He'd borrowed $500 from his father, Raymond Pappy Smith, a former carnival game operator who understood crowds. Pappy joined the operation as general manager and became its public face. Harold's Club, the family eventually dropped the apostrophe, would become the most famous casino in the world. The Smiths were carnival people at heart, and they ran their casino like the best carnival you ever visited. Pappy's philosophy was simple: run an honest game, let people win something, treat them like family, and they'll come back. They hired female dealers in the late 1930s, one of the first casinos anywhere to do so, partly out of necessity because many of the men were heading off to war, but also because Pappy understood that a woman dealing cards changed the atmosphere of a room. It made gambling feel less like a vice and more like entertainment. They built the Covered Wagon Room in 1947, a pioneer-themed extravaganza that included the famous Silver Dollar Bar, with more than 2,000 silver dollars encased in plastic along the bar top. 2 years later came the Roaring Camp Room, filled with hundreds of historic firearms, flintlock muskets, dueling pistols, Civil War-era Winchesters, Colt revolvers, and enough Western memorabilia to stock a museum. They commissioned a massive mural of Old West pioneer settlers, 70 feet long, 35 feet high, 220 porcelain panels, and hung it on the Virginia Street facade in 1949. It cost $60,000, and it became a Reno landmark overnight. And then there was the advertising. Pappy Smith launched a campaign so aggressive it became a national phenomenon. Harold's Club or Bust, painted on a cartoon Conestoga wagon, placed on more than 2,000 billboards across 45 states and eventually around the world. Gambling advertising was technically illegal in many jurisdictions, but nobody seemed to mind a covered wagon. By the early 1950s, on a single Labor Day weekend in 1952, more than 44,000 people walked through Harold's Club's doors. It was the largest casino in Nevada, and it had done something no casino had done before. It had made gambling seem respectable, even fun, something families could do without shame. Pappy had another signature move. He would walk through the casino at random and double customers' bets at whatever table caught his eye. He kept a book called the Once Only Book, where anyone who had gambled away their travel money could borrow up to $50 to get home, no questions asked. If they paid it back, they could borrow again. The house philosophy was that a grateful customer was a returning customer. 2 years after Harold Smith opened his doors, another young operator arrived in Reno from Southern California. Bill Harrah was the son of a small-time gaming man who ran skill games on the Venice Beach Pier. In 1937, Harrah opened a bingo parlor on North Center Street. It lasted 17 days. He went back to California, regrouped, and came back the following year. This time, he opened Harrah's Plaza Tango, and then another small club, and then in 1946, he opened his real casino, Harrah's Club, at 210 North Virginia Street. Where the Smiths were showmen, Harrah was an engineer. He kept immaculate books. He insisted on clean carpets, polished fixtures, well-dressed dealers. He understood that the customer who felt respected would gamble more and complain less. Over the next 3 decades, Harrah slowly bought up every neighboring property on Virginia Street and Center Street, absorbing one small casino after another into his expanding operation. He opened a second location at Lake Tahoe in 1956 and started busing customers in from Northern California, a revolutionary idea that turned working-class Bay Area gamblers into a reliable revenue stream. The war years of the 1940s sealed Reno's position. The Reno Army Air Base opened at Stead in 1942, bringing thousands of servicemen with ready cash into a town that had bars, casinos, and women who were technically only there for the weather. Defense workers poured in from California's shipyards and factories, looking for weekend entertainment. Harold's Club, which had started with 2 slot machines, was processing visitors by the tens of thousands. After the war, those servicemen went home to places like Sacramento and Oakland and San Francisco, and they told their friends, and their friends drove over the Sierra to see for themselves. Reno was becoming a habit for Northern California. George Wingfield, improbably, had recovered. A mining friend named Noble Getchell invited him to invest in a new gold mine near Golconda in the mid-1930s. The mine proved spectacularly productive, and by 1941, it was the largest gold-producing mine in the state. Wingfield was solvent again. He never regained his old political power, but he held on to the Riverside Hotel and lived comfortably in his Court Street home until his death in 1959. The man who had built Reno's financial infrastructure lost everything and quietly rebuilt himself. He died on Christmas Day at 83 in the city he had shaped more than any other single individual. Virginia Street on a Saturday night in 1950 was a river of light. Neon signs stacked 3 and 4 high, the click of chips audible through open doors, the Reno Arch blazing overhead, and the Mapes Hotel rising 12 stories above it all. The Mapes. That building deserves its own paragraph because it was the finest thing Reno ever built, and losing it may have been the worst thing the city ever did. The story begins in 1937, when a rancher named Charles Mapes Sr. bought a corner lot at North Virginia and First Streets, right on the Truckee River, with the intention of building a grand hotel to honor his father. He hired an architect from Oakland, F. Harvey Slocum, to design a 12-story tower influenced by the Art Deco style of the Empire State and Chrysler buildings. Then Charles Sr. died, and the war intervened, and the plans sat in a drawer for nearly a decade. His son, Charles Mapes Jr., finally broke ground in January of 1946, and the Mapes Hotel opened on December 17, 1947. It cost between $2.5 and $3 million, financed by the Bank of America and the First National Bank of Nevada. When it opened, the Mapes was the tallest building in the state and the first major high-rise hotel built in the United States after the war. It was also something genuinely new, a purpose-built combination of hotel, casino, and entertainment venue under one roof. The prototype for the modern casino hotel, decades before Las Vegas perfected the form. On the 12th floor, the Sky Room offered floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the Sierra Nevada, a cosmopolitan nightclub where you could dine, dance, and watch a floor show while the mountains turned pink in the sunset. The lobby had 3 elevators. No other building in Nevada had as many. The guest rooms were small, just big enough for a twin bed that doubled as a sofa during the day, but the 40 suites were lavish: living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, tiled bathroom. Marilyn Monroe stayed in one of the corner suites during the filming of The Misfits in 1960. Clark Gable came and went through the lobby, and a photographer named Henri Cartier-Bresson documented it all. The opening day announcement captured the hotel's ethos perfectly. Come in full dress if you want any time, or come in cowboy boots. You will feel equally at home. The Mapes and the Riverside and Harold's Club and Harrah's. These were the pillars of Virginia Street through the 1950s and into the 60s, when Reno was, without exaggeration, the gambling capital of the United States. The city's population in 1960 was about 51,000, but it punched enormously above its weight. Every major entertainer played the rooms: the Marx Brothers, Judy Garland, Sammy Davis Jr., Tony Bennett, Liberace, Gypsy Rose Lee. When the Winter Olympics came to Squaw Valley in 1960, just 40 miles away, Sammy Davis Jr. debuted as lead singer of the Will Maston Trio at the Mapes Sky Room. Frank Sinatra stayed at Ranchera, Bill Harrah's sprawling estate on the south side of town, where the private lake and the 3-hole golf course made it feel like a world apart from the neon. The University of Nevada gave the city intellectual ballast, and Frederick de Longschamp's buildings, the courthouse, the post office, the Riverside, gave it architectural dignity. Virginia Street had banks, clothing stores, jewelers, a Woolworth's. You could walk the whole corridor and never run out of things to see or places to go. Harrah, meanwhile, was turning his Reno operation into something no one in gaming had seen before: a genuine corporation. In 1968, he acquired the old Golden Hotel and contracted casino architect Martin Stern Jr. to build a 24-story hotel tower on top of it, the first real high-rise hotel tower in Reno's casino district. In 1971, he took Harrah's Inc. public. In 1973, it became the first casino company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Harrah also collected automobiles with a passion that bordered on obsession. By the time of his death in 1978, he had amassed more than 1,400 cars, the largest collection in the world. He died during heart surgery at the Mayo Clinic at 66, leaving an estate valued at $138 million. His collection was eventually broken up, but 175 vehicles were donated to form the William F. Harrah Automobile Museum in downtown Reno, which stands today as the National Automobile Museum on Lake Street, not far from the original Reno Arch. Reno wasn't without its scars, even at its peak. On February 5, 1957, at 1 in the afternoon, a natural gas leak ignited beneath the streets near Sierra and First, a block from the Truckee River. 2 explosions ripped through 5 buildings, killed 2 people, and injured 49 others. The blast rattled windows up and down Virginia Street and reminded everyone that the pipes and ditches under the glittering surface were old, improvised, built for a smaller town. But the casinos reopened their doors that evening, and the tourists kept coming, because that was what Reno did. But the seeds of decline were already planted, embedded in the very things that made Reno successful. The city's economy depended on three pillars, and every one of them was vulnerable. The divorce trade depended on Nevada having the most lenient laws in the country, a competitive advantage that could evaporate the moment other states loosened their own statutes. The casino industry depended on Nevada's monopoly on legal gambling, a monopoly that existed only because every other state had so far declined to legalize it, and the whole operation depended on Reno's geographic position as the nearest Nevada city to Northern California, which was true only until someone built something bigger in the southern desert. Las Vegas had been growing since the war, but through the 50s, Reno could still hold its own. Then came the 60s. In 1962, the number of divorces granted in Las Vegas surpassed Reno's for the first time. Other states were beginning to relax their divorce laws. The phrase no-fault divorce entered the legal vocabulary, and by the early 1970s, you didn't need to go to Nevada to end a marriage anymore. The women stopped coming. The dude ranches closed. The Riverside Hotel, which had been built specifically to house divorce seekers, began a long, slow slide into irrelevance. Meanwhile, Las Vegas was doing what Reno couldn't, growing massively, building enormous resort complexes, attracting a different kind of tourist. Las Vegas had the Southern California market, which was larger and warmer. It had cheaper land and room to sprawl. It had corporate money flowing in. Howard Hughes had bought Harold's Club for $11.5 million in 1970, but Hughes also bought half of the Las Vegas Strip, and that's where the real money went. By the late 60s, the power center of Nevada politics and finance had shifted permanently from Reno to Clark County. Reno's population kept growing. It reached 72,000 by 1970, over 100,000 by 1980. But the growth was suburban sprawl, not downtown vitality. People built houses in the subdivisions south of town and drove to the mall and stopped going downtown on Saturday nights. There was a deeper structural problem that nobody talked about much. The old casinos, Harold's Club, the Nevada Club, even the Mapes, had been built for a different era. They had no hotel towers, or small ones. They had narrow floors and low ceilings. They lacked the enormous showrooms and open-plan casino layouts that the new generation of resorts offered. Harold's Club had never built a hotel at all, which was fatal once the industry shifted toward the resort model. The Smiths had never expanded by buying additional properties around Reno or at Lake Tahoe, the kind of strategic acquisitions that Harrah had made to build a vastly more resilient empire. When the Smiths sold to Howard Hughes and the corporate owners came in, the employees who had loved working for a family operation fled within a year. The heart went out of it. A casino, it turned out, was not just a building. It was a set of relationships, and when you bought the building without the relationships, you bought an empty shell. The Mapes Hotel closed on December 17, 1982, exactly 35 years to the day after it opened. Charles Mapes Jr. had invested heavily in another downtown casino called the Mapes Money Tree, which failed and pulled the hotel into bankruptcy. For 18 years, the building sat empty on Virginia Street, its Art Deco facade growing grimmer with each passing season. Proposals came and went. The National Trust for Historic Preservation put it on its list of the 11 most endangered places in America in 1998. It was the only building on that list to be demolished. The city of Reno bought the property for $4 million, then voted to tear it down. On January 30th, 2000, at 3 minutes past 8 in the morning, Super Bowl Sunday, the Mapes Hotel was imploded with 75 pounds of dynamite. The whole thing took a few seconds. 53 years of history collapsed into a pile of concrete and brick on the bank of the Truckee River. The site sat vacant for years afterward. Eventually, they put in a small plaza. People sit there now sometimes and look at the river. Harold's Club was sold to Howard Hughes's Summa Corporation in 1970 for $11.5 million. The new owners immediately changed the culture of the operation, and within a year, most of the original employees had fled to other casinos. The heart was gone. The club limped through 2 more decades of corporate ownership, closed in 1995, and was demolished in 1999. Harrah's bought the property. They also demolished the adjacent Nevada Club, which had operated since 1946. Both buildings were replaced by an outdoor plaza. The famous Harold's Club mural, those 220 porcelain panels of pioneers and covered wagons, was carefully removed before the implosion and reinstalled at the Reno Livestock Event Center, 2 miles from where it had hung for half a century. The Fitzgerald's Hotel Casino closed, the Flamingo Hilton closed, the Sundowner, the Comstock, the Golden Phoenix, the Virginian, the Horseshoe Club. One after another, the properties along Virginia Street went dark. Some were demolished, some were converted to apartments or monthly rate residences. The Riverside Hotel, after closing in 1986, sat vacant for over a decade before the city partnered with an arts organization to convert it into artists' lofts in 2000. DeLongchamp's 6-story brick facade still stands on Virginia Street, a few steps from where Fuller's Log Inn once sat. But the lobby where Cornelius Vanderbilt Jr. checked in, and the suites where Rita Hayworth waited out her 6 weeks, are now open-plan studios where painters stretch canvas. Harrah's Reno, the flagship, the original, the casino Bill Harrah built from a failed bingo parlor into the foundation of a global gaming empire, closed its doors during the COVID shutdown in March of 2020 and never reopened. The property was sold for $41.5 million to a real estate developer who announced plans to convert it into apartments and retail space. As of now, the project has stalled. The building is still there, dark on Virginia Street. The numbers tell the story of what happened to Reno's casino economy. In fiscal year 2000, Reno's casinos accounted for about 11.5% of Nevada's total gaming revenue. By 2019, that figure had dropped to 5.2%. The number of Reno locations reporting to the Gaming Control Board fell from 27 in 1995 to 16 by 2020. The expansion of tribal casinos in Northern California, beginning in earnest after 2001, cut directly into Reno's Bay Area customer base, the same market Bill Harrah had cultivated with his bus program 50 years earlier. The very customers he had trained to make the drive to Nevada now had casinos an hour closer to home. A placemaking study commissioned by the city of Reno found that 70% of Virginia Street's frontage is what urban planners call dead. No active businesses, no street-level engagement, nothing to draw people in. Casino walls with no windows, no entrances, no life. The block where Harold's Club once processed 44,000 people in a single weekend is an outdoor plaza. The corner where the Mapes Hotel hosted Marilyn Monroe is a concrete park. The slot where a dozen different casinos once lined up like bright dominoes is controlled by holding companies and family trusts that can afford to wait because Nevada's property tax structure makes it cheap to sit on underutilized land. Reno's population has continued to grow. It reached 264,000 by the 2020 census, and the city has diversified its economy. Tesla built its enormous gigafactory east of town. Amazon and other logistics companies have established operations in the area, drawn by the absence of state income and corporate taxes, the proximity to California markets, and relatively cheap real estate. The University of Nevada remains a major employer and institution. The city has a whitewater kayak park on the Truckee, a baseball stadium, a thriving arts district in Midtown, and an annual balloon race that fills the sky with color every September. There is a Reno that works, that has jobs and restaurants and things to do, and it exists mostly south and west and east of the old casino core. But Virginia Street, the street where Myron Lake collected his tolls, where the Reno Arch blazed over the crowds, where Pappy Smith walked the casino floor doubling bets at random tables just to keep customers happy, where Bill Harrah insisted on clean carpets and well-dressed dealers, where the Sky Room of the Mapes Hotel offered you the Sierra Nevada through floor-to-ceiling glass while Tony Bennett sang, Virginia Street is quiet now. The arch still glows, blue and silver since 2018, the colors of the university's Wolfpack. Below it, the street runs south toward the river. The bridge where the rings were thrown was demolished in 2015 and replaced by a modern span that cost $18.3 million. 4 light fixtures from the 1905 bridge were saved and mounted on the new one. The Truckee still runs under it, the way it always has, heading east toward the desert, carrying whatever people drop into it.